Welcome back to Animal Attacks. Today, Montana grizzly attacks are shocking the whole country. We begin in Highlight Canyon, where a solo hiker trusted a reopened trail until a sole grizzly and her cub emerged from the bush only a few yards away. It was the 27th of July, 2026, in Highlight Canyon, Montana. Before sunrise, cold fog sat low between the lodgepole pines and the trail was wet from overnight rain. The canyon was quiet except for water moving through the brush and wind passing through the trees. That summer, Montana was dealing with a sharp increase in grizzly encounters. Drought and poor berry production across much of southwest Montana had pushed bears farther from their traditional feeding areas, leading them into campgrounds, ranches, orchards, hiking trails, and even rural neighborhoods. Reports of sightings were appearing almost daily, and a series of attacks drew national attention. Some news outlets began referring to the situation as Montana's bear attack plague, while authorities rejected the nickname, instead describing it as an unprecedented surge in grizzly-human conflicts driven by worsening food shortages and bears ranging farther in search of meals. Brinley Vo was 33 years old and worked as a civil engineer in Bozeman. She hiked almost every weekend. She was organized, fit, and used to planning trips around weather reports, trail maps, and closures. But repeated closures had begun disrupting her routine. When a section of Highlight Canyon reopened after several days without confirmed bear sightings, she treated the decision as proof that the risk had passed. The reopening notice still warned visitors that bears could remain in the area. It advised hikers to make noise, travel in groups, and keep bear spray ready. Brinley went alone anyway, hoping to finish the hike before work. She entered the trail with both earbuds in, listening to a podcast. Her bear spray was packed inside her backpack instead of clipped to her belt or chest. Dense willow thickets crowded both sides of the trail, limiting visibility to only a few yards. That combination is hard to overlook. A reopened trail is not a clear trail, and silence in thick brush is never a good trade for a podcast. Less than 50 feet off the path, an adult female grizzly was feeding with her yearling cub beneath a fallen log. The sow had likely been using the thick cover because it offered food, shade, and protection for the cub. Brinley could not see the bears could not hear her approach over the wind and running water. Grizzly bears can weigh several hundred pounds, sprint at roughly 35 miles per hour, and react defensively when surprised at close range, especially a mother with a cub. Most defensive attacks happen in seconds, before a person has time to make a careful decision. Brinley came around a bend where the trail narrowed between willow branches. The sow lifted her head at almost the same moment Brinley stepped into view. They were only a few yards apart. The cub moved behind the larger bear. The sow rose forward from the cover and charged immediately. There was no long warning display and no time to create distance. Brinley turned toward the trail behind her, but the uneven ground and wet roots slowed her first steps. She reached for her backpack strap where the spray was stored inside. The canister was still buried in the main compartment. By the time she pulled at the zipper, the bear had already crossed the gap. The impact knocked her off the edge of the trail and into the brush. The sow struck with her front paws, then bit down as Brinley tried to shield her head and upper body. The yearling stayed back in the vegetation while the mother continued the defensive attack. The sounds did not travel far through the wet brush. There were no hikers nearby enough to intervene. After a short but violent encounter, the bear moved back toward the cub and disappeared into the timber. The attack was not a hunt. It was a sudden defensive response from a mother bear that believed her cub was endangered. But that distinction would not change what happened to Brinley. Later that morning, other hikers found a trekking pole and water bottle off the trail. When Brinley did not return home, Search teams began following her route. They located her that afternoon near the bend where the encounter happened. Brinley Vo was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries. Investigators determined that she had surprised a sow grizzly at close range while moving quietly through dense cover. Afterward, more trails in southwest Montana were closed. Rangers increased warnings about carrying bear spray where it could be reached in one motion, making noise in poor visibility areas, avoiding fresh tracks or scat, and hiking with other people whenever possible. None of those steps guarantee safety, but inside grizzly country, preparation has to happen before the brush starts moving. Brinley's death became another sign that the crisis was spreading beyond one trail or one canyon. And less than 3 weeks earlier, in the Gallatin National Forest, another man had followed a fresh bear sign into a willow drainage straight towards something a grizzly was already guarding. It was the 9th of July, 2026, in the Gallatin National Forest, Montana. Morning clouds hung low over the timber, and rain from the night before had left the ground slick along the creek bottoms. By midday, thunderstorms were expected to roll across the mountains. That summer, grizzly encounters were rising across Montana. Drought had reduced natural forage, berry production was poor, and bears were moving farther into lower elevations looking for food. Trail closures expanded, ranchers reported livestock losses, and each new attack deepened public concern. Corwin Hale was 41 years old and worked as a wildlife fence contractor near Livingston. He installed bear-resistant fencing around ranches, remote lodges, and livestock properties. He knew the country well, but over time, experience had made him too comfortable with warning signs that should have stopped the job. A guest ranch called him that morning after finding fresh damage along a newly installed fence. The owner had seen tracks crossing the property before sunrise. Corwin chose to inspect it alone instead of waiting for his assistant. Along the fence line, he found overturned rocks, claw marks on lodgepole pines, and large piles of fresh scat. The signs were recent. He followed the prints toward a narrow willow drainage, trying to find where the animal had crossed. Fresh tracks, wet scat, and torn up ground are not clues to follow deeper into the woods. They are reasons to leave. Corwin moved quietly because he believed the bear had already gone. His bear spray was clipped inside his tool bag, not on his belt or chest. The willows were so thick that he could see only a few feet ahead. Less than 40 yards away, a large male grizzly had covered a freshly killed elk with branches and brush. The bear was still close to the cache. Grizzlies are highly defensive around food sources, especially carcasses. An adult male can weigh several hundred pounds, run up to about 35 miles per hour, and cover close distance before a person can react. In thick cover, a food defense charge may come with almost no warning. Corwin rounded a blind bend beside the creek and stepped into the bear's feeding area. The grizzly exploded from the willows. It came forward low and fast, throwing wet leaves and dirt behind it. Corwin turned toward the creek bank, but the mud beneath his boots gave way. He slipped down the uneven slope and struck the ground hard near the water. He reached toward the tool bag as the bear closed in, but the spray was still inside. There was no time to unzip the bag, find the canister, remove the safety clip, and fire. The grizzly hit him before he could regain his footing. Its weight drove him into the creek bank. The first strike knocked him onto his side, and the bear bit and clawed in rapid defensive bursts. Corwin tried to protect his head and neck with his arms, but the soft mud gave him no stable position to push away or get up. The attack continued for only moments, but the bear stayed close to the carcass cache. Each movement from Corwin kept the animal defensive and engaged. Thick willows enclosed the drainage, and no one on the ranch could see or hear what was happening. This is what makes a carcass encounter so dangerous. The bear does not need to chase someone down a trail. It only needs someone to walk into the space it is already defending. After the attack, the grizzly moved back toward the hidden elk remains. That evening, the ranch owner became concerned when Corwin missed 2 scheduled radio check-ins and did not return to his truck. Deputies, wildlife officers, and volunteer searchers followed the damaged fence line into the drainage. They found Corwin near the cached elk carcass. He was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries sustained during the defensive attack. Investigators later located the grizzly still guarding the elk nearby. They determined the encounter was food defense behavior, not a predatory attack. The distinction did little to ease the fear spreading through Montana that summer.
Corwin became the first widely reported fatality in the state's 2026 surge of grizzly conflicts.
Following Corwin's death, authorities reminded the public to travel in groups, make noise in dense vegetation, avoid animal carcasses and fresh bear signs, and keep bear spray immediately accessible on a belt or chest holster. Officials emphasized that most defensive grizzly attacks happen at close range, leaving only seconds to react, making preparation the best defense. The next fatal encounter would not happen deep in the forest. It would unfold in a Flathead Valley orchard, where a farmer went out before sunrise expecting a black bear and found something far larger instead. It was the 18th of August, 2026, in Montana's Flathead Valley. Before sunrise, fog rested between the orchard rows, and the air carried the damp smell of fallen apples and wet soil. The first light had not reached the far end of the property. That year, bear encounters were no longer limited to remote trails. Grizzlies had been reported near campgrounds, ranches, rural homes, and fruit orchards. Dry conditions had reduced food sources in parts of the state, while productive apple crops in the Flathead Valley gave bears an easy reason to return night after night. Osric Fenner was 57 years old and had operated his family apple orchard outside Kalispell for nearly 30 years. He knew the routine of protecting a crop. Deer damaged young trees. Raccoons raided fallen fruit. Black bears sometimes entered the lower rows during harvest season. For several mornings, Osric had found broken branches, scattered apples, and overturned fruit bins. He believed a black bear had been returning after dark. He planned to identify where it was entering, then clear the fallen fruit before the workers arrived. He carried a flashlight, but no bear spray. He went alone. The orchard was quiet as he moved between the trees. Low branches blocked his view. Apples covered the wet ground, softening each step. His flashlight beam passed over trunks, fruit bins, and piles of windfall apples, but it did not reach far beyond the next row.
An orchard can look open in daylight. Before sunrise, with trees, branches, and heavy fog, it becomes the same kind of close-cover country that makes a surprise encounter so dangerous.
Osric saw fresh claw marks on one tree and a trail of crushed apples leading toward the center of the orchard. He followed it slowly, expecting to find a black bear feeding and moving it away with noise. Instead, his flashlight caught the outline of a much larger animal only a short distance ahead. The grizzly had been feeding on fallen apples beneath low branches. It had returned to the orchard repeatedly, learning that the rows offered food with little effort. Osric had entered the bear space before either of them had a clear chance to avoid the encounter. Adult male grizzlies can weigh several hundred pounds and can sprint at speeds near 35 miles per hour. A bear surprised at close range near a reliable food source can react with a sudden defensive charge. The beam of Osric's flashlight landed across the bear's shoulders. The grizzly lifted its head from the apples. For a moment, the trees and fog held both of them in place. Then, the animal rushed forward. Osric stepped back toward the truck, but he was deep between the rows. Branches struck his face and shoulders as he turned. His boots slid on wet apples crushed into the soil. The bear crossed the gap almost immediately. It hit him from the side and drove him down between two trees. The flashlight fell from his hand and rolled into the grass, turning the rows into shifting bands of weak light and darkness. Osric tried to cover his head and push away from the animal, but the bear's weight pinned him against the ground. The grizzly struck repeatedly in a fast defensive attack. Its claws tore through his clothing as it repositioned over him, and its jaws clamped down in short bursts before releasing and striking again. The orchard trees blocked the view from the farmhouse. The sound of the wind moving through branches covered much of the disturbance. Osric could not reach the truck. There was no bear spray to deploy. There was no second person nearby to create noise, call for help, or pull a vehicle closer.
The worst part is how ordinary the start was. He was not looking for a grizzly. He was checking damaged fruit in a place he had worked for decades.
But bears do not recognize familiarity with a property as safety. Neighbors heard shouting from the orchard and called emergency services. By the time responders reached the rows, the bear had already left the area. Osric Fenner was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries sustained during the encounter. Wildlife officers determined that the grizzly had become food conditioned by repeated access to fallen apples and had returned to the orchard to feed. After the attack, orchard owners across the area were urged to remove fallen fruit daily, secure garbage, and use electric fencing where practical. The point was not to make a bear disappear. It was to stop teaching one that an orchard was an easy food source. But the next story would not involve a bear searching for apples in the dark. It would begin years earlier in the Custer-Gallatin National Forest, where a wildlife photographer followed a grizzly into dense timber for one closer image. It was the 6th of September 2018 in Custer-Gallatin National Forest, Montana. A cold morning haze sat over an open meadow beside the highway, and frost clung to the grass near the tree line. Kalen Rourke was 29 years old and worked as a freelance wildlife photographer from Missoula. His photographs had appeared in regional outdoor magazines. He often spent long days tracking predators and waiting for the kind of image most people never got. That morning, several motorists had stopped along the road to photograph a large male grizzly feeding in the meadow. Rangers had repeatedly warned visitors to stay at least 100 yards away and never follow the bear into the trees. Kalen stayed with the other photographers at first. He kept his camera ready as the grizzly moved through the grass, feeding slowly and showing little interest in the vehicles. Then the bear left the meadow. It crossed into a dense stretch of timber where the morning light disappeared beneath the branches. Most of the people near the highway packed up and left. Kalen waited a few minutes, then followed the bear into the forest alone.
This is where the distance rule mattered most. A bear tolerating people from far away does not mean it will tolerate someone following it into cover.
Inside the timber, the ground was uneven and covered in deadfall. Pine needles softened Kalen's footsteps. The trees blocked his view in every direction. He moved carefully, trying to find an opening where the bear might appear. Instead, he walked directly into its personal space. Adult male grizzlies can weigh several hundred pounds and can react with extreme speed when surprised at close range. In dense cover, a defensive charge may begin and end before a person can turn around. Kalen stepped around a fallen pine and saw the grizzly less than 15 feet ahead. The bear was facing away at first. Then it spun toward him. Kalen backed up, but his boot caught beneath a branch. His camera swung forward as he lost balance. Before he could recover, the grizzly charged. The bear struck him in the chest and knocked him hard into the forest floor. The camera broke free from its strap and landed several feet away. Kalen raised his arms toward his head as the grizzly came down over him. The animal clawed at his upper body, then bit down and shook him against the ground. Kalen tried to roll beneath a fallen branch, but the bear's weight kept him pinned. It struck again as he attempted to crawl backward through the pine needles. The attack happened in a narrow pocket of trees where no one from the road could see him. The bear bit and clawed in rapid defensive bursts, then backed away briefly. When Kalen moved again, it returned and struck once more before pulling away into the timber.
A photograph was never worth entering that forest behind the bear. The safe distance disappeared the moment he chased to follow it.
Other photographers contacted authorities after Kalen failed to return to the roadside pullout. Search teams found him later that day inside the timber. Kalen Rourke was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries sustained during the encounter. Investigators concluded that the grizzly had reacted defensively after being followed into dense cover. The next story begins in the Yellowstone River Valley, where a ranch foreman follows drag marks into a wooded creek bottom looking for a missing calf and finding a grizzly already feeding on it. It was the 22nd of May, 2016, in Montana's Yellowstone River Valley. Before sunrise, fog covered the pasture grass, and the creek bottoms were dark beneath thick cottonwoods. The ground was wet from recent rain. Xavier Holt was 46 years old and worked as a ranch foreman. He managed livestock, fences, irrigation, and calving operations across thousands of acres. He had spent more than 20 years working grizzly country and was used to handling problems before they became expensive losses. That spring, several calves had gone missing. Xavier found a damaged section of fence near the edge of the property, followed by deep drag marks leading toward a wooded creek bottom. He assumed a mountain lion or coyotes had taken the animal. He drove the ranch utility vehicle near the trees, then continued on foot. The drag marks cut through the mud and disappeared beneath low branches. Xavier followed them alone. The creek bottom narrowed as he moved deeper into the trees. Fallen logs blocked the path. Brush crowded both sides. He could not see around the bends ahead.
A carcass trail is not just evidence of what happened. It can lead straight to the animal that it still considers the food its own.
Xavier rounded a bend and found the missing calf. A mature male grizzly was already feeding on it. Grizzlies often defend carcasses aggressively. A large male can weigh several hundred pounds, cover short distances at speeds near 35 miles per hour, and charge with almost no warning when surprised near food. Xavier stopped only a few yards from the bear. The grizzly lifted its head from the carcass. Its muzzle was wet, and its body stayed low over the calf. There was no clear path around it. Thick brush blocked one side of the creek, while the muddy bank dropped toward the water on the other. Xavier began stepping backward. The bear charged. It crossed the distance before he could reach the bend behind him. Xavier turned toward the creek bank, but his boot slipped in the mud. He went down hard on his side near the water. The grizzly struck him immediately. Its front paws hit his upper body and drove him into the ground. Xavier raised his arms to protect his head, but the bear bit down and pulled him across the mud. He tried to push himself toward a fallen log, yet the bear stayed over him, clawing and biting in rapid defensive bursts. The creek water splashed around them as Xavier struggled to move. The bear released briefly, then came back when he shifted beneath it. The attack continued beside the calf carcass, in a place too deep in the trees for anyone on the ranch to see.
The bear was not searching for Xavier. Xavier had entered the one place the bear was prepared to defend.
When Xavier missed his scheduled radio check-in, co-workers began searching the property. They found the ranch vehicle near the creek bottom and followed his tracks into the trees. Wildlife officers later located Xavier near the missing calf. He was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries sustained during the food defense encounter. After the investigation, nearby ranches changed their livestock recovery procedures. Workers were instructed to report suspected kills before approaching them and search in pairs when possible. The next story moves into Flathead National Forest during late August, where a science teacher leaves the trail to photograph a dense huckleberry patch without realizing a sow grizzly and her cubs are feeding only yards away. It was the 24th of August, 2021, in Flathead National Forest, Montana. Late summer heat sat beneath a clear sky, but the trail remained cool in the shadow of thick fir and pine. Huckleberry shrubs crowded the edges of the path. Eli Mercer was 38 years old and taught high school science in Helena. Every summer, he backpacked through Montana and photographed native plants, wildflowers, and berry-producing shrubs. He knew the forest well and had spent years documenting seasonal changes along hiking routes. Late August was a busy feeding period for grizzlies. Bears were consuming as much food as possible before winter, and healthy huckleberry crops had drawn both hikers and bears into the same forest drainages. Recent reports had placed a sow, grizzly, and 2 cubs near the trail. There had been no closure, but warning signs had been posted at the trailhead. Eli stopped several times to photograph ripe berries. Eventually, he noticed a dense patch just beyond the trail. The shrubs were thick, heavy with fruit, and lit by a break in the trees. He stepped off the path with his camera. The brush quickly closed around him. His view dropped to only a few feet. His bear spray was attached to his backpack belt, but not positioned where he could grab it in one quick motion.
The trail was not the problem. Leaving it put him inside the same cover where a mother bear was already feeding her cubs.
Less than 10 feet ahead, the sow grizzly was in the huckleberries with both cubs. A female grizzly protecting cubs can react with immediate defensive force when surprised at close range. Even a smaller adult sow has the speed and strength to overwhelm a person before they can escape dense brush. Eli pushed through one last curtain of branches and came face to face with the bear. The cubs scattered deeper into the brush. The sow charged instantly. Eli stumbled backward toward the trail, but vines caught around his legs and low branches struck his shoulders. He reached toward the bear spray, pulling at the strap on his backpack. The canister remained secured as the bear closed the distance. The grizzly hit him hard and drove him into the huckleberry shrubs. His camera was thrown from his hands. The sow struck with its front paws, then bit down as Eli covered his head and upper body. He tried to roll beneath the brush and crawl toward the open trail, but the thick branches trapped his arms and slowed every movement. The bear remained over him, clawing and biting in fast defensive bursts. The cubs stayed close in the vegetation, and the sow reacted again whenever Eli moved beneath her. The attack was brief but devastating. After several violent moments, the bear pulled away and moved back through the huckleberries toward the cubs.
There was no dramatic chase and no long warning. One step off a familiar trail put Ellie inside a mother bear's feeding area, and there was no time left to fix that decision.
When Eli failed to meet family members at the trailhead that evening, search and rescue teams began searching his planned route. They found his camera near the berry patch the next morning, then located him in the brush nearby. Eli Mercer was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries sustained during the defensive encounter. Wildlife investigators determined that the sow had acted naturally after being surprised while feeding with her cubs. The bear was not removed. Seasonal warnings were expanded, and ranger patrols increased during berry season.